to the Playwell podcast. My name is Jenny Lester, and I am the Learning and Development Officer at Play Scotland. This month, we will be discussing Playday and the Playwork Principles with Mick Conway. Mick started his Playwork career on Bermondsey Adventure Playground in 1978. He went on to become the director of the Hackney Play Association, where he was the founder of Playday and created the Quality in Play system, and was a consultant on the development of the Playwork Principles. He helped set up London Play and Play England, and ended up back where he started, working on an adventure playground in Islington for a change. These days, he's kept busy by 3 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. Here is our CEO, Marguerite Hunter-Blair, catching up with Mick.
Welcome, Mick, to the Play Scotland podcast. It's really lovely to meet with you today and have a chance to chat with you about all things play.
My pleasure.
For over 45 years, you have been a champion of children's freedoms and right to play. How would you define play?
Oh, define it. I could maybe try to describe it better than try to define it. It's by its nature, it's almost indefinable. I think that's what Bob Hughes used to say. I'd say it's instinctive. I think that's very obvious because children don't need to be taught to play. It's absolutely instinctive. It has evolved in humans and animals for a reason over hundreds of thousands of years. And we now recognise it as a basic human right. So there's 3 good reasons why play is important and why it's important for children to be able to engage in it freely.
Your name is widely associated in the play sector with Adventure Play, Play England, one of the first chairs of Play London as well. But actually, across the UK, you're very well known as well as one of the founding members of Playday, and one of the team, the group that got together to revise the Playwork Principles that have been hugely influential over the last 20 years. So what would you see as the big achievements for play over the lifespan of your career? And what do you think are the big challenges ahead for us?
I think, the biggest achievement really is that we're grimly hanging on by our fingernails in spite of everything that's happened over the last 10 years or so. I'm very pleased. The number of adventure playgrounds has decreased dramatically in England, and those that are still open are sometimes only open a couple of days a week and so on. So there's been a dramatic reduction in the opportunities for children to go and play on adventure playgrounds, which I find very sad. And I think the fact that Playday is still going strong astonishes me. I mean, three of us we called a meeting back in 87 and nobody turned up, so we went to the pub and, believe it or not, came up with the idea of Playday. Although not exactly as it is now. It's like everything, it has evolved over the years. I mean, to begin with, it was kind of predicated on having something in a big event in parks that adventure playgrounds, holiday play schemes and so on, and so families could just turn up and come to, so we'd all come together in celebration of play. We were very, very, very careful to not make it a protest against anything. It was always going to be a celebration of something. So that got us, straight away, that gets you buy-in from the politicians. And I think that was, we did, decide on that actually from the very beginning that that's what this was going to be. But then the idea of these big things in parks, well, that sort of worked at the beginning because there were only a few, and they were funded and run essentially by local authorities and play associations. And we had the resources then to do these big events, and we had sort of festival support groups and the like would give us free marquees and all that. The reason Playday is on a Wednesday is interesting. We could never hire marquees and things like that and all the stuff we needed to run big events at weekends because there was always things going on at weekends. So we decided, let's have it midweek so we can get all the stuff we need. And that was the only reason it was on a Wednesday. And of course, nothing much is open on a Sunday. Particularly in summer, nothing is operating on a Saturday. It's usually Monday to Friday. But that's the reason we did midweek. And in August, just because holiday play schemes are around, and we get information out. And of course, it was one of the best accidental things we ever did, having it in August, because that's a silly season. and the press are desperate for any story at all. And then the other lovely thing about Playday was we kind of moved more to this distributed model, the idea that do what you do wherever you are with what you have and who your kids are, and call it Playday. It's your thing, but just call it Playday. And that worked incredibly well. And it worked brilliantly with local media. Local radio in particular absolutely loved that concept. There's something local going on, tell us about that, but as part of a big national event. And then, very strangely again, it was kind of all the right-wing press and the tabloids, they love Playday too. We give them the line, it's about everyday freedoms. These are about the freedoms of British children to be out in their neighbourhoods, and they fell for that hook, line and sinker and absolutely ran with it. So the Daily Mail was one of our biggest champions for many years.
And actually, to come full circle, I think that idea of children's freedom to play probably would go down better with the media today than children's right to play. I think there's been a bit of a kickback about
absolutely
rights over the last few years. So that language at the beginning, is the fundamental one anyway, isn't it? And the fact it's underpinned by rights doesn't, these things, are fashionable, aren't they, with the press? And at the moment, I think we're more interested in the concept of freedom to play. And that is actually what is at peril, even now, as you say, despite the success of Playday for many years and lots of good research and private sector coming in to sponsor research when they saw how popular it was. But yes, as you say, still on first Wednesday of the month in August, and immensely popular.
Well, it's an idea that turned out to be a good one and that people could buy into. And that idea of do your own thing where you are and call it Playday, I think that's what's really made it work for people, because then people can, they can just buy into it at whatever level they can. And then it's I think it's great for people to feel they're part of something bigger, and part of something that's now becoming a tradition. So I think there's a feel-good factor in there as well. And then, of course, the most important thing is that kids love it.
Yes, and I think certainly in Scotland, there's not that many local authorities do the big events.
No.
I know in Northern Ireland it was very hard to get any to do the big events, but actually that idea about families doing it for themselves, that traditional community development model of play streets, playing in your garden, inviting people over, just going along to your local park, that has really been fantastic. And that's what's prevailed, despite the ups and downs of the economy over the years. That, as you say, people being involved and at the same time knowing they're part of something bigger. Incredible. You came up with all the answers over a few, I'm sure, glasses of water at the pub one night.
It wasn't water, I can assure you.
So there we go, from 1987 through to 2023. That is incredible. And I think the idea of Playday, I know in Scotland we do play on the longest day and play on the shortest day, which leads to play in the dark. But really all derived from the idea of a universal play day.
And I think the other message is that, this is a day for children's play. This is the National Day for Children's Play, but every day is a day for play, And get that. The other legacy of Playday, which has really warmed the cockles of my heart, is that Alice Ferguson was very kind enough to tell me that Playday gave her the idea of playing out, this idea of doing it locally for yourselves, that distributed model.
Yes.
Which is a fantastic legacy, because that is something that's really, really, really taken off big time.
So that playing out has, and I know in Scotland again as well, community play streets and just different models, with street furniture. I know living streets, Sustrans, a lot of us extending that idea, going back to the night in the pub, that children should be able to play everywhere, but mostly they want to play in and around where they live.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's one of the biggest challenges. Children, when you ask them, are not asking for destination playgrounds, more parks, more swings. They want to play in and around where they live. And that is a challenge.
Every year we did, for many years when we had the money at Play England, we used to do a large survey. I think it was 2,000 children, 2,000 parents and 2,000 adults, people who didn't have children. And every year, consistently, year on year on year, children family is the very, very, very top of their concerns. And then second, playing outside with friends. Always, it was consistently second and what they wanted. And that was like certainly over 10 years, and it never varied. So that was very interesting. And that's a representative sample of the UK population.
Yes.
So, because we've got Maury and various these big polling agencies to do it. So it was a consistent message, And then the other thing is this thing about children, there is, I think there's something in the UK I think a hangover from Victorian times that children should be seen and not heard and that kind of thing. And I think that still prevails somewhere in the subconscious of the nations, My kickback on that is just like children need to be children. When it's in their nature to do this, to just go out and be with friends and play, and it's good for them. Then you can do all the secondary things. For me, play is a good outcome in itself, by definition. But then in the messaging, you need to frame it always, for whoever the audience is. And so you can talk about health benefits, mental health benefits, physical activity benefits, friendship, resilience, all these sort of things, recovery from pandemic, all that kind of stuff.
And you're right. But honestly, twice this week, I've had this conversation with various government health and public health officials about the cultural change. And I remember having Sue Palmer on my board at Play Scotland, and she was adamant that we needed, publicity campaigns about culture change because we don't realise the importance of seeing children out playing.
Yeah.
And I know there's been research, Inspiring Scotland was talking about it, where if you've got wee ones out in early years, out in green spaces, adults will then come out into those green spaces. And so you get a perfect circle, what's good for young people, good for older people. It's mutually reinforcing. But this culture that we are not a child-friendly community, we're not a child-friendly, I would say the UK is not particularly child-friendly. I wouldn't pick out any one area of the UK in particular. I would just say in general, we don't value and interesting, I was reading some reports in the paper about schools that have been banning mobile phones in the classroom. And the first difference that's noticed is the noise levels go up. So if they're banned in the classroom and the playground, the noise levels go up because children start speaking to each other. Right. And they don't speak in low, they don't speak in indoor voices, even when they're indoor. And they start playing and they start running about. So the noise levels go up. And it is this sound of children playing is the sound of a happy community. And I think we need to harness that message more. I think sadly, still work to be done. And I was just going to say as well, Professor John McKendrick, as he is now, had done research in 2017 on 30 years of Playday. And I think he called the piece of work The Transformation of Play. And he was really talking to parents about the difference over 30 years in play opportunities for children and young people, and came up with, unsurprisingly, the demise of outdoor play, the rise of electronic play and other things. But I think, along with the truisms that you were talking about in the research, he also found that the biggest barrier to children playing out are often the parents.
Yeah.
We do have good policy, we do have good practice, we do have good provision, but it is the parents that we need to persuade. And that's why, going back to Playday again, getting families involved, it has to be the number one direction of travel. If we don't crack that nut, it doesn't matter if we have good policy, good practice, good parks, good playgrounds. If we can't get parents to support and understand the importance of play for children to have fun and for their development. So I think we're going to have to do a bit more work on this.
Yeah, and I think there's a level of fear among parents that they'll be seen by neighbours as being bad parents if they're not supervising their children, or not hovering over them. And I think that there is that level of fear. And then, of course, as I said to Bob Hughes one time, I said, the elephant in the cul-de-sac is the car. mean, I think there's something like 4 times as many cars as children in the UK. I mean, it's just there's been an enormous growth in motor cars, since the 50s. And I think that's when the decline of children playing out has certainly it started. I don't think we measured it much in the 50s and 60s. I mean, I think it was the 70s the first time people were looking at that, and the statistics show the decline since the 70s in ranging behaviour and so on of children. Again, cars have a huge, huge role to play in this, and this society privileges the car over children. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely. This is top of the hierarchy. And alongside cars, car parking spaces, and car parks. I think at one stage I could have told you what the ratio was between play space, golf space and car parking space in Scotland. And let me tell you, the play space was at the bottom of that, in terms of mapping these spaces.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes, and I think certainly working with SUSTRANS and looking at planning in Scotland now, the national planning framework for I think it's policy area 13. It's very much about active travel, and it doesn't mean more cars. It means about trying to make it possible for everybody else to get about that's not a car, and that we see as a key policy area to benefit play for that very reason, that it will create more opportunities for play by hopefully having less cars, delivery vans and others on the road as well. Another area I wanted to explore with you, and we touched on it at the beginning there, was about we're talking about parents and how important that is, but obviously the profession of play work is incredibly important as well. And people who provide play opportunities who aren't always play workers either, they could be in the creative arts, in sports and recreation. And the Playwork Principles have had a massive impact, I would say, on unpacking what it means to provide play opportunities for particularly children 8 years and up. They're not in care settings. They need to be treated as older. The offer that they need has to reflect that. And I think the Playwork Principles has gone a long way to helping to support a better offer for young people to play. Do you want to tell us a wee bit about how the Playwork Principles, your role in that came about, and what do you see as the legacy of that, and maybe what are the challenges in the future around the Playwork Principles?
Well, they came about through an awful lot of very hard work. But Playwells, they found the money to do this, although I think that all the play organisations have been talking about, we need to do something about the assumptions and values, which the playwork sector more or less agreed were not fit for purpose underpinning national occupational standards. And we needed something developed by the profession, for the profession, for the playwork sector. So the Playwells then commissioned Bob Hughes, and who, to my surprise, asked me to join a select little group of himself, me and Gordon Sturrock. And I remember we went to the very first meeting, and Gordon did his usual 15-minute spiel with words I'd never heard before. So at the second meeting, I brought along the concise Oxford English Dictionary. I actually went out and bought one and slapped it on the table, and I said, Gordon, if it's not in here, it's not going in this work that we're doing.
Kind of good at making up words, wasn't he? Yeah. He was very good at it.
But Gordon got the better of me. He says, well, okay, look up play worker in it. Of course, it's not there. Playwork doesn't exist in dictionaries, even these days. But and then, of course, it was an iterative process, and it was a huge amount of consultation. I mean, there was several thousand people were involved at various stages in commenting on the stuff that we were coming up with. And then we had these grinding sessions at Playwells with a whole bunch of us. There was Playwork Principles oversight group. I've forgotten the name of the group.
I think it's something like that, yes.
Yeah, but we had these sessions where we boiled it down, and we got down to the 8 Playwork Principles, which a lot of people have pointed out that the first 2 aren't principles, they're just statements or descriptions of what playwork is. But that's neither here nor there. But I think just having that fairly simple, easy to understand framework without, based on good scientific research and so on, but without using too many big words. I think it has made a real impact. And it took us a while to get it over the line with Skills Active, for example, because, they were the gatekeepers of the national occupational standards and all this. But in the end, they did, within a couple of years, it didn't take that long. But there they are. So, yeah, so we've got that framework. I think what worries me is that the amount of training that's available, playwork training available, I think has shrunk massively. I think I can't see that there's anything very much around, And I think, and of course, then there's no requirement on employers to ask for a playwork qualification, in terms of Ofsted registration and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's a kind of pity. I mean, in one way, I don't want playwork to be too regulated by any means, because what the regulators know very, very little. If you sort of would take that hands-off approach it off, what do with sewage? I think that would suit me down to the ground.
Just to go back to the principles, I know in Scotland the Care Inspectorate, who are the regulator of care services, had evaluated the after-school sector, unsurprisingly to those of us in the know, but I think it was quite a surprise to them to find that the services that were framed by the Playwork Principles, not only were children more satisfied in those services with what was on offer, parents then, as a result of that, were much happier as well. And that's where I feel the two things tie together sometimes, that if we can have the informed, enlightened provision, framed by the Playwork Principles, I think that will be one of the key tools that we have to constantly go back to the parents to reinforce that it is important that children get a wide range of play opportunities, that they're allowed to take risks, and that, yes, sometimes there might be, minor injuries sustained because of that. There might be dirty clothes. There might even be torn clothes. But that the overall benefit to children from getting these activities is enormous. And I think certainly in Scotland, I'm sure it's the same across the UK, that a lot of children only get their opportunity to play in these services, in the after-school services, because a lot of the school day is now being condensed and quite structured, so that these services are more important now perhaps than ever before.
Yeah. I think in terms of that, of getting the message across to parents about risk, risk is very, very, very difficult for people to truly understand what it is, because we are biologically very, very, very risk averse. Humans we're hardwired to be risk averse. It's that old thing, this operation has a 90% chance of success. Okay, I'll go for it then. This operation has a 10% chance you will die. Actually, no thanks. It's the same. It's how you frame it, And so in terms of risk, what I found worked really, really well with what you'd call a lay audience, or non-playwork professionals, was, look, it's like learning to ride a bike. There's only one way to learn to ride a bike, and that's by falling off a sufficient number of times, until you get it right. And I said, and the stabilizers have to come off sometime. And yet but the benefits of children being able to cycle just far outweigh any knocks and bumps, and even a broken bone they might sustain when learning to ride a bike. But they're going to have bumps and falls and tumbles. But we all accept that. Society has no problem whatsoever about that concept and learning to ride a bike, but they don't like it in anything else to do with children's play or what children are doing.
I mean, I didn't realise it, but yes, children can't learn to walk if they don't fall over.
Yep, that's true.
Which is true as well. I mean, I do think risk has featured largely over the years, and I think that, as you say, feeds into a lot of the anxiety of parents. And I think quite rightly also observed earlier about the fact that parents fear being judged. If you sent your 4-year-old off to cycle to early years or school in P1 unaccompanied, then you could well end up being reported for that.
Absolutely.
So I think the social norms have changed over the years, and it's interesting though that the messages that you came up with for Playday, the rationale for Playday all those years ago, are stronger now than ever, and yet lots of good work has happened in between times.
Yeah.
Something tells me that 45 years on, your job's not done, Mick.
Oh, no. I'm just so passionate about play because I've seen, the enormous benefits that it brings to children, and I've been working in it since 1978, off and on. And that makes me then just think, well, you have to keep grinding on, keep bashing on. You'll get knocked back, you'll get knocked down. But keep going. And in terms of campaigning, that's what you're always rolling a boulder up a hill in campaigning. It's very rarely rolling down the hill. So you just have to keep pushing, trying to get the message across.
And just to put you on the spot then, if there was one thing, if you had the magic wand and there was one thing that you could change, what do you think might have the biggest impact on children's freedom to play?
Enshrine the UN Convention directly into UK law.
That's a lovely answer. Yeah.
I think that'd be the one thing that would make a lot of difference, because then after that, then regulation, you see, would then have to follow on the heels of that and so on. And I think then that landscapes would change all over the place.
We're on that journey in Scotland. We're not there yet. So I know from sitting on a number of fences around that piece of work that it's not straightforward. But it is, I think, that ambition, as you say, it then leads to regulation, it leads to guidance, it leads to new norms, and people start to understand it better, and then they start to be able to measure it better, because at the moment it's very hard to talk about whether things have improved. But we know that relentlessly, the people survey and research and tell us that more children spend more time indoors, more children are more sedentary, more children prefer to play online than outdoors. And a lot of that can be alleviated by creating more and better opportunities for children to play outdoors and indoors.
That's a ticking time bomb for us right there.
Yes.
More sedentary children, more children indoors, more children spending time on screen, because there's some research that shows that that's having an effect on children's eyesight.
Yes,
you need to be looking at the horizon a lot more than we are now.
So a lot of children now have myopia at a very young age. But actually, I think if you add it all up as an equation, it seems to equal poor mental health and well-being, which an enormous anxiety that seems to occupy a lot of our young people. And I think as teenagers, anxiety goes with that, with the job description. But it's really alarming. And I think we always knew, as professionals, we had to pay attention to teenagers, because obviously the brain development as a teenager is very complex. But to know that children as young as 4, there's a Girl Guiding survey came out this week, and it talked about 89% of girl guides feeling anxious most of the time. I mean, that is shocking. It's really, and yet if you're building, campfires and abseiling and canoeing down rivers and playing rounders or tag, you don't feel anxious when you're playing a game. You can part, the brain doesn't have the energy or the time to worry about anxiety, because you're trying to catch the ball or beat somebody at racing or whatever. So play has to be part of the solution. I'm not suggesting it's the only solution.
Yeah. And your brain has been flooded with endorphins when you're playing.
Yes.
So that's what anxiety just gets swept away, washed away.
Yes.
But the anxiety levels, yes, we see there's been a massive increase in that. Now, some of that is because it's better reporting, better monitoring, and so on. But I think there has been a definite increase, and I think that's to do with just restrictions on children's freedoms. And I think that's the one. Again, just keep banging away about children's everyday freedoms. I mean, that one of the campaigns we did, there was when they tried to bring in that antisocial behaviour bill. Antisocial behaviour and policing bill a few years ago. And essentially, a clause in that would have banned children from playing in the street if one neighbour was annoyed.
Power of one. How awful. Uh-huh.
Yep. So, and that could have got a 10-year-old an antisocial behaviour order. So we got together with all the major children's charities. We were all meeting about something else, but I just come across this, and Enver Solomon from National Children's Bureau, he was a wonderful guy. He runs one of the big charities now, but he got it straight away that this thing, we've got to really fight this, and how do we push back on it? And I just said, look, it's about how we frame it. We must frame this as about everyday, ordinary children's freedoms, British freedoms, that kind of thing. And so we did, and we put out a press release, and all the media absolutely jumped on this. And so that clause was taken out and put back in the box. But it's sitting there somewhere in the Home Office to this day, and they'll be bringing it out again and again and again. They've been trying this for decades, you know.
I mean, I know that we had mosquito devices. I remember first Children's Commissioner here really going to town on the mosquito devices, which, you know, were put on to scatter young people from places and from hanging about, really, as if they were vermin. You know, even to use the language of vermin with them, it really, it's shocking. And it does seem to be something that plays out every generation, that we have this issue. We don't seem to accept that young people need to have somewhere to hang out, and they don't want to be tucked away where no one can see them. We should actually be pleased that they want to hang about where they can be seen. They're safe and everyone else feels safe. So, no, I think this goes back to our culture, and we're very averse, I think, to being child friendly. And I think that's, for me, that's one of the big challenges, you know, and obviously the design of the public realm to include children and young people rather than exclude them. We've done a very good job of it, including the car. Why can't we do a really good job on including children and young people?
And of course, there's that famous chicken and egg thing where when we asked parents in those surveys, what is preventing you from letting your child out to play? And quite a lot of the answers came back was, I'd let my child out to play more if there were more children out playing.
Yes.
So, right, so which comes first then, you know? Streets and public spaces are getting depopulated, you know, and so therefore, you know, they're not as inviting. I mean, the most inviting thing about a space for a child to play in is other children, somebody to play with, you know.
And I think a lot of us feel safer going out, you know, in the evening if children are out playing. You know, you feel, as you say, that the street's not isolated, that it's a buzz, that it's a sociable place to be. And you see a lot of older people, you know, last week when the weather was lovely, warm and sunny, going out and just standing, watching children playing outside, just having fun, and actually encouraging them to play some of the bold games that they used to play, you know, bashing on doors. I'm not recommending this, but, you know, banging on doors and running away. Do you, when you think of that lovely, innocent fun, really?
That reminds me, the best adventure playground structure I ever saw was the door. It was literally a door frame set in the ground, you know, an ordinary bog standard domestic front door of a house, just set in the frame, and the hinges and so on in this here. And the things that kids did with that, you know, there were all these sort of ceremonies, you know, polite ceremonies, knock, 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 and can I come in for tea, and posting letters through the letterbox and all this sort of thing. And then bang, bang, it's the police, you're under arrest. You know, all sorts of stuff. And knock down Ginger, that game about banging the door and running away and stuff. That was in Glamis Road Adventure Playground, and it was just fantastic. You know, such a simple thing. And I think that tells you everything you need to know about what the things that children need to play. It'll play with anything, anywhere.
And all the time.
And all the time, yeah. And with other children. As I said, I think the thing that invites children into a space most is other children there playing.
Mick, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today. Thank you very much for agreeing to do the podcast for Play Scotland. Thank you.
You've blown away a few cobwebs that were gathering in my head over the last year or so, so I haven't been doing a lot. So it's been an absolute pleasure sort of going over the field again once more time. So very, very good luck with all that you're doing, and I wish you all very much well across the Four Nations.
Thank you, Mick.
Thank you for joining us on this podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast on your preferred app, and follow us at Play Scotland on Twitter, and find more information on our website, playscotland.org.